If I could go back to the very beginning of my tax sale career and make some changes, would I? Yeah, probably so, because I'd make a lot more money a lot faster with it quite a bit less stress. Now, I do think that everything in life leads you to the path that you're supposed to be on, but if I had to start over, there's quite a few things that I would have done differently, hindsight 2020, because I now see how much faster, how much smoother, and how much less stressful the journey could have been if I have known just a few key lessons earlier in my career. So today on this episode, I want to share with you 10 things that I would have done differently if I could start over. These are exact lessons that took me from a very, very confused new investor to figuring out things to building a full-time tax sale business, buying and selling these properties all over the country. Let's jump into this lesson. The first thing that I would have done differently is I would have taken the time to understand title issues much, much sooner. I lost my very first deal because I didn't know a thing about title insurance, title search, title clouds. I remember the title company actually called me and they said, "Casey, we can't close this deal. It's a tax deed." As if I was supposed to know that. I had no idea what they were talking about. They told me, "We can't help you. Call an attorney." So I called an attorney and I said, "I've got a tax deed and the title company said I can't sell this property. I need to know how I can sell it so I can get my cash. I can get my money and move on," right? He said, "Well, it's going to take some time and some money." I didn't know what a clouded title was, why it was important, or that I had a choice of selling through other methods. I just assumed that once I bought the property, I was good to go. Big mistake. The buyer for that first deal backed out because he could not get title insurance when he was purchasing the property. The sale fell apart, and I was stuck with a property that I could not sell until I went through a very lengthy quiet title lawsuit, something I didn't have any idea what it was prior to that day. It was one of those moments that made me realize you can't outsource understanding. You can't outsource knowledge. Even if you use an attorney or a title company, which you should, you still need to know how everything works. It's the difference between being reactive and being in control of your business. Now I look at every deal through a different lens, right? How can I go about selling this property? Do I need to clear the title to this property? That helps me determine how much to spend on the property and how to strategize my transaction. That understanding alone has saved me a lot of money and a lot of time and countless headaches. The next thing I would change is I would just stop hesitating. Early in my career, I spent way too much time hesitating. I'd research a property, it would check all the boxes, and I would still sit here wondering, why is this one so cheap? What am I missing? Should I even be bidding on this property? I didn't trust myself. While I hesitated and lacked that trust, somebody else bought the property and they usually made money off. Now, I think every new investor does go through this stage. You second guess yourself because it feels safer than being wrong. But the truth is, hesitation will quietly cost you far more than mistakes ever will. I eventually learned that once your research is solid, accurate, thorough, and you've double-checked everything, in short, did what you're supposed to do, due diligence-wise, you have to start trusting yourself. You have to move. You have to take action. Confidence does not come from thinking. It comes from doing. The more deals you research and bid on, the more your instincts will sharpen. I would have trusted myself much earlier in this process instead of overanalyzing everything and second-guessing everything, and I would have dozens and dozens of more properties in my portfolio. Next one is structured learning and mentorship. When I started this business, there wasn't any sort of structured education for tax sale investing. I was selling real estate at the time. I was a realtor. And I remember going door to door at the company that I was working for, asking about this tax deed and tax lien thing, trying to learn anything that I could. And those agents there, they looked at me like I had three heads. There were no good books, no online courses, no YouTube channel. Heck, YouTube didn't even exist at that time. There were no mentors out there to learn from. You learn the hard way, by trial and error, mistake after mistake. You would waste thousands of dollars and you would learn, I probably shouldn't do that again. I still remember calling counties that didn't even really understand their own process, trying to figure out how liens and deeds worked, and I would show up at live auctions not even sure if I was in the right place. It's come a long way since then, and I figured it out eventually, but it took a very, very long time. If I could go back and create something like the Tax Sale Academy, believe me, I would have joined the moment I could have. With the right structure, with the right mentorship, you can skip years and years of confusion and you can start creating your wealth much, much faster. You need a roadmap, a mentor, a community, something that we've created in the Tax Sale Academy. And it would save you a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of frustration. Education is the one shortcut that pays you back over and over and over again. The next one, create systems much sooner. When I first started, my business was absolute chaos. Every auction was different. Every deal had its own little messy notes that I put in a folder somewhere. Every email, every listing, every buyer follow-up, everything I did manually, right? You know, when you have one or two deals going on, you can probably figure it out, right? But once you begin to grow, it gets very overwhelming very quickly for myself, for my bank account, for my bookkeeper, for everybody that is involved in my business, right? I remember getting a tax foreclosure notice one time myself for a property that I forgot that I owned. I bought the property 2 or 3 years prior, and I get a tax foreclosure notice in the mail because I didn't pay the taxes because I didn't know I even owned that property. That's how chaotic everything was. That's when I realized I really didn't have a business. I just had a bunch of moving parts held together by memory, which was apparently not that good. So I built systems. Now, if I'm researching a property, I'm marketing it or selling it or everything in between, it runs off a very repeatable system. Same templates, same checklist, same workflow every single time. There's a reason that pilots use checklists, right? They prevent mistakes. It's the same reason that I use one for my tax sale business, to prevent mistakes, to make me efficient, consistent, and to allow my business to continue to scale. If I could start over, I would build those systems on day one, even if they were very, very simple ones. Because when the opportunity does show up to scale, you don't rise to the occasion. You tend to fall back to the levels of the systems and the processes that you have in place. The next one, I would have leveraged professionals sooner. For the longest time, I tried to do everything myself. Handle listings, took my own photos, marketed every single property, dealt with every single buyer, answered every single phone call, managed every single piece of paperwork. And sure, it might have saved a little bit of money, but it also cost me a lot of time, and time is what limited my growth. So in turn, it actually ended up costing me much more money than I saved by being cheap and trying to do everything myself. You know, hire attorneys, realtors, scouts, these type of people when you need them. It all pays off tenfold. Obviously, this will come over time. You know, I'm a huge fan of doing your own research, of knowing what you're buying, not outsourcing tasks that you should be doing yourself. But when it comes to things like selling real estate for market value 5 states over, just let a local realtor handle it and don't worry about it. The next one, I really, really wish I would have expanded faster. For years, I only invested locally. And when that market kind of capped my income, I went just one county over and then another county over until I realized those markets also capped my income. So what could I do? I could invest in another state and another state. And eventually that single moment, the moment I started going to other states, the opportunities exploded and my life changed forever. I realized that I could go from one market to another, all while cherry picking the most profitable properties based on my objectives, making more money and moving on and doing it over and over and over again than I ever could have if I just chose one market. There are thousands of markets to choose from. Why did it take me so long to expand? Had I expanded faster, my income, my net worth would have grown much, much faster. You don't have to know everything about every single market that you get into, but if you have those systems in place, if you learn how to research those markets, if you learn how to invest in those markets, you will eventually master the process and the entire map opens up. You have the entire country at your disposal. Choose the most profitable properties and keep doing it over and over and over again. The next one, I've talked about this one before. I would have built my buyers list and my buyers database much, much sooner in my career. This one, it's so important. You know, for years, I would buy a property and then I would go out and scramble to find a buyer. And when I found a buyer, I would finally make money. And then one day, I had a property that I posted online for sale. And I had 2 people that really, really wanted that same property. I sold it to one of them, and I told the other person I would contact them in the future when I had a similar property available for sale. A month later, I found a property that they liked. I called them up, and they bought that property from me. I didn't realize it at the time, but what I was doing, I was creating a very, very small, very simple buyer's list of 2 people. And at that point, my entire business model really began to shift. It became the way I marketed properties. I would buy one property, advertise it like crazy. I would line up 10 buyers, and then I'd buy 5 or 6 more to resell to the same people. Eventually, that led to one of my most protected resources, which is my buyers list. Nearly every single person on my buyers list as of today was created through my marketing methods designed to get them onto that buyers list to be able to sell them properties very, very quickly. And a lot of them have already purchased something from me in the past. It allows me to sell properties to people who I already have built relationships with that will buy fast and without any issues. If I had built that list from day number 1, it would be much, much larger, and I would have saved a lot of time and avoided so many slow selling properties. Your buyers list is your lifeline. It is your golden ticket to freedom and success in this business. It's what turns inventory into income. It's a revenue producing machine if you do it correctly. Start collecting your names, email addresses, and phone numbers right now. This will become your greatest long-term asset as a tax sale investor if you do it correctly. Something else I would have done much earlier is I would have used my retirement account much earlier. It took me way too long to even realize this was an option. For years, I would just invest based on, my business account or my checking account. Meanwhile, my IRA just sat there. I would add a little bit of money here and there. It would make a nominal return. And then one day, a friend of mine who's a financial planner asked me to sit down to go over my finances and my retirement plan, all that good stuff. He said, "Why are you not using your self-directed retirement account to invest in tax liens and tax deeds?" The moment I realized you could take your self-directed IRA and buy tax liens and tax deeds with it was very, very eye-opening for me. I think everybody who is 40 or beyond wishes they probably would have started thinking about retirement much earlier in their career. Had I used those funds alongside my personal investing funds all along, my retirement account would be massive right now. Now, you don't have to have a lot of money in your retirement account to start. You just need to structure it correctly. But you're able to build personal wealth through everyday funds to pay your bills and that kind of stuff. But you can also build retirement wealth side by side and then let time and compounding do the heavy lifting. Leverage your knowledge, leverage your skill set to build your retirement account. Because I promise you, at some point in your life, you will look at your retirement account and you'll say, "Wow, I'm really glad I did that," or "I should have done that," like you're hearing right now. Something else I probably should have done a little bit earlier is work more the strategic angles. Early on, I was always focused on finding the next deal. Buy, sell, repeat. It was kind of a constant money chase, right? But later on, I realized there were bigger, smarter opportunities out there for me. I've run across people that have partnered with mobile home companies and small builders, and it allows them to kind of share in the profit-making process, which allows them to actually make more money than just flipping the lot, And I've done this many, many times later in my career, but I probably should have explored those opportunities earlier in my career. That small strategic shift kind of turns individual deals into consistent pipelines and allows you to make a little bit more money, to squeeze more out of those properties than you would have otherwise. Is it a perfect scenario? Is it something you do every deal? Absolutely not, but there's definitely opportunities out there if you look for them and if you're willing to accept them. I was not, I held off for a long, long time before I started doing any strategic stuff like that. And the last one is, I would have stayed more focused on tax sales. I've kind of wandered here and there from time to time, flipped bank-owned houses. I've done subdivision deals. I've, worked traditional real estate, had a lot of side businesses, and I learned stuff from each one. But if I could go back, I would focus entirely on tax sales from day number 1. The wealth that it creates, the freedom, the predictability, it's all here in the tax sale niche. Every time that I stepped away to chase something else, it slowed my tax sale progress, thinking I was growing like a cool side business or something, right? Tax sales reward focus. Once I committed to mastering this business, instead of bouncing between every so-called opportunity that came along, that's the time my business really took off. Had I done that earlier, just stayed focused, I'd build a lot more wealth much faster with much less stress that was completely unneeded from little side gigs, right? If I could sum it all up in one sentence, it would be this. I would learn fast, act confidently, and I would build systems that allow me to scale without losing control of my business. Every mistake that I made taught me something very valuable, but the truth is, you don't have to make them all yourself. Whether you're here for your first deal or your 100th deal, focus on learning. Focus on building a consistent business. Focus on building a process that supports you for years to come. If you want to go deeper on this topic, if you want to learn from my 23 plus years in this business and connect with other serious investors, make sure you check out TaxSaleAcademy.com. Hey, take care, folks, and make it a successful day. We'll see you next time right here on the Tax Sale Podcast. Bye-bye.